Well, he did it.
He endorsed. Is that what you wanted, establishment? GOP, are you now happy? Are we now going to stop the infighting and the never Trumpers never say never Trump again? Happy Saturday afternoon, folks. Scotty Nell Hughes here with RideAlerts.com. I just got finished on CNN with Poppy Harlow going against my favorite, Hillary Rosen. And, of course, the talk is this really going to be unity amongst the GOP? Okay, let me tell you why this whole endorsement happened. And my disclaimer is, I'm not happy. I don't like Senator John McCain. He is probably the epitome of what the establishment rhino class that has ruined the Republican Party and, honestly, ruined this country represents. He is called, being a member of the Tea Party, he has called us wacko birds. Remember when he called all the Ted Cruz folks crazies and hobbits? He's called Trump supporters. He has a long history of insulting us grassroots conservatives. Okay, so Mr. Trump put that on. Kelly Ayotte. I mean, if you look at the scores, and I wish I would have done this before I started, if you look at the scores of these three, they're not conservatives. Paul Ryan of all of them. And yes, he was elected in Wisconsin. Yes, he was elected under the Tea Party name. But I've always said he got on that Romney presidential bus, drank some sort of Kool-Aid, and I don't know what happened to him, because all of a sudden he took this pill that made him start bashing conservatives. But Mr. Trump still endorsed. Why did he endorse? He already said, he kind of gave Paul Ryan back his own little teaspoon of sugar that Paul Ryan had given him earlier. And people are going, well, why did he do this? Well, it's called unity, folks. I've always said, back in when we started the Tea Party back in 2008, and in 2010 when we had this great revival and we took over Congress, and in 2012 people were starting to get disenfranchised because the folks we elected in 2010 did nothing. We realized at that point that the problem is you've got to have both sides. Within the Republican Party, you have to have those grassroots conservatives. Yes, those folks like Ted Cruz. Those folks like Rand Paul supporters. You've got to have, those are the passion. Those are the people that go door to door and knock on doors and bake the breads and do the phone banks, stuff the mailers. Those are your workers. Those are your lifeblood of the Republican Party. But guess what? They can't survive alone. That's why when they had this talk of separating doing this third party, it was never going to work. So then, flip over, and you have the establishment, where they do have the structure. They also have the money. And so both of them separately cannot survive on their own. But together, they make a really big, a really amazing, a really dynamic team. But both have to respect each other 50-50 at the table. One cannot think that they're higher than the other. Well, tell that to the establishment folks, who up until now, they expected that they could sit there and continuously insult those of us within the conservative movement, and that we would continue every time they were up for re-election to show up at their rallies, show up at their crowds, and sure, we weren't those high donors. We were the bodies within their rallies, and they thought we could. Well, this year, we've actually proven that that's not necessarily true, as once again, those establishment candidates were the first ones out. Those were the guys that were pushed out. So that leads us to today. Mr. Trump, who has fought against the establishment time and time again, learned a really hard lesson this week. That despite bringing in $83 million, he still was not able to get all of these folks on his board. Now, here's what people are missing, this whole idea with Paul Ryan. First of all, we had the con incident that happened last week, and we can talk about that, because that's a whole nother beast. But for some reason, whenever Mr. Trump hits that iron in the fire, whenever things get tough, these Republican rhinos do everything they can to find the first camera, the first radio interview, the first Washington Post, New York Times reporter, and bash Mr. Trump, and sit there and disavow him. Now, they didn't pull back their endorsement of him, but they disavow him. So, of course, Mr. Trump said, wait a minute, I've just raised you guys $84 million. And I've said all along that it's not just mine, it's also the party's. I don't know the figures of who got what. But I think Mr. Trump, well, wait a minute, I just raised you all this money and you guys are still running to the New York Times and Washington Post to bash me? Guess what? I'm going to stay out of your race. Well, that was until this entire backlash happened. And one thing they were forgetting was the friendship, I think, between the GOP chairman, Reince Priebus, and Paul Ryan. sometimes kumbaya. And like I said, I don't like the endorsement of the three of them. I actually like some of the candidates. I like Kelly Ward, who's running up against John McCain. I like the person who's running against Paul Ryan. But I understand right now that the big picture is, the big strategy is, and that's what Rusty Lee just points out, Hillary is on the other side. I think Donald Trump realizes, as we saw these poll numbers, which, by the way, don't read into the polls. They're not everything. I mean, come on. Less than a week and a half ago, Donald Trump was winning all the polls. Then, this week, you have every single poll saying, oh, look, he's losing. Well, if he was losing so much, and not that I don't trust the polls, yes, I wish they were on our side, but if he was losing so much, why is he filling up rallies unlike he's ever before? I mean, even Hillary Clinton's largest rally is still less than Donald Trump's smallest rally. This week, she was in Omaha, which, by the way, if you haven't seen the video of the little gaffe she had, which maybe it wasn't such a gaffe, where she said, I promise we are going to raise taxes on the middle class. Guess what? She's right. There's no way you can afford all of the $1 billion of entitlements that she's promising above what we have right now and not raise taxes on the middle class. So maybe she was actually telling the truth for once. Maybe this is the one line of Hillary Clinton we can actually believe. But she tells us to a rally of maybe 1,000, 2,000, I don't know the numbers. It wasn't that big of a deal in Omaha. And then she goes to a tie factory this week, and you see the chairs sparkled around. She went to a black church, and it was in North Carolina, and the pews aren't even filled. Yet Donald Trump, even in Maine, it was wrapped around the corners. You have 12, 15,000 in Pennsylvania, in Iowa, in Ohio, and then when yesterday in Wisconsin, you were seeing thousands upon thousands. So while, yes, maybe the polls are not reflecting in Mr. Trump's favor, he's got something that she doesn't. It's called engagement. It's called loyalty. And as they continue to sit there and tell us that the reason why we lost in 2012 was because we didn't reach out to these different diversities. We didn't sit there and bring in these demographics. The reason why we lost in 2012 was because no less than millions of conservative evangelical Christians decided not to go to the polls. They decided not to vote. Mr. Trump has to keep his base engaged, and that's why these rally numbers are so important. Meanwhile, Hillary Clinton's having to use high school students to bring them in to her rallies to fill those seats. I mean, how pathetic is that? And yet, supposedly, she's winning in states like Georgia. Really? No. Have no fear. Let's say if we do look at the polls. Back in 1980, when Reagan went against Carter, up until 2 weeks before the election, was beating Ronald Reagan by 8 points. Listen, these polls are extremely temperamental, and we live in a time today when it just takes one event, when it just takes something happen, or as we're hearing this October surprise release of Hillary Clinton's emails that Julian Assange himself said would actually probably lead to her indictment. They're so dangerous. All it takes is one of those. Now, granted, early voting is going to start soon here. So that's the one thing. I hope that it comes sooner rather than later, that we can take her out. But you also don't want to play your cards too quickly, because then you have damage control. And the Democrats are really good at that. I mean, I have to ask you folks a question out there. Do you think the Democrats all 100% agree with Hillary Clinton? When was the last time you heard a Democrat come out, find the local camera, find the closest newspaper, say, I don't agree with Hillary Clinton and that email server? It doesn't happen. But yet Republicans do it? So no wonder why they can sit there and say we're not unity. But yet, we did see something happen on Friday that we've not seen in over 200 days. Hillary Clinton took questions. She took questions. Now, who did she take questions from? National Association of Black Journalists and the National Association of Hispanic Journalists. Yeah, that's basically her home turf, her home field. They didn't even invite Donald Trump, I don't think, to speak. And you know the real telling sign when she was sitting there answering questions? You heard laughter, you heard cheers, you heard everybody was so excited. And when they introduced Donna Brazile, the new DNC cheers, laughter, cheers, woo! Yeah, you wonder why they call our media biased. Think they'd have that same response to Donald Trump? But Hillary Clinton, she kind of got locked up there because while she took some questions from the friendly crowd, once again, she stepped on her own toes. And we added the word short circuit. Short circuit, what does that mean? I mean, it was a movie from the 80s, I think, if I remember right. It was about a robot. Remember, they kind of already say that, Hillary Clinton's a robot? I mean, if she could choose any other phrase, I would choose a phrase that has nothing to do with short, circuit, or robot. Yet she managed to do all three. And so now we're going to add that into our dictionary of phrases from campaign 2016. And we go forward. So into next week, what do we do? Do you think that Donald Trump has turned the leaf? Like I said, I'm not happy with that endorsement, but I understand why. It's for the betterment of the party. Now, what I want to see is either be quiet if you have a complaint, or get on board the Trump train. Welcome. We welcome you. Because right now, we're at the point that if you're not helping us, you're working against us. And I don't have the energy anymore to fight the rhinos or those never-Trumpers within our own party. Look at John Kasich. He just did an interview with Jake Tapper. First of all, why are we even talking to John Kasich? Oh, wait a minute. Because no person's ever won the White House without winning Ohio. Or I think it's Republican. Whatever. Supposedly we really need Ohio. Now, John Kasich, this is my problem with you. If you're going to sit there and go against what millions of people, if we are so close to the White House but can't win it because you refuse to get involved in the one state that you won, then guess what? The problem is yours, and shame on you. Because millions of Americans want Donald Trump. Millions of Americans did not want you. So why don't you get on board and go with the people? Put your ego aside. You are a huge asset. Ohio is a huge asset. We want those voters. They're very important. It makes it a lot easier. But you also need to get involved. And I hate to think that we put that much power into one state. A lot of people have worked hard on this. So next week, big week, Monday, Mr. Trump is going to stay on message, something that everybody here says that he needs to do. We need to actually stay on message. And Monday he starts off with a speech on the economy, exactly one of the major issues that people in America need to hear. It's what they're asking for. So, keep up with us, Scotty Hughes, RightAlerts.com. I'm on CNN all weekend. Tomorrow, talking media bias. So I'm sure I'll have a great commentary after that segment's done. Scotty Hughes, RightAlerts.com. Have a great Saturday. We'll talk to you guys later.